Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of pretty vast gaming world, I guess.
I don't
This
think the
is
boys and girls are going to be
Dan.
watching, Dan. We're COPA compliant.
Oh, shut up. This is Dan Anthony and our pal Joe back again with episode 5 of the Pre-Game Network podcast. Here to talk about everything new, fun, and interesting in video games, and
And
also
miserable.
break each other's balls. Wow. Okay. Right off the
Five
grip. Cool. You know
five
what,
episodes. I
Joe?
can't
What
even
have you
count
been
that high.
playing lately?
Hey, Joe, what have you been playing?
The benefits of being host. God damn it.
So, to be honest, totally honest, because you just said like new, fun, and interesting. I've actually been playing kind of like older stuff.
Okay.
Like I
Most people
have
have lately.
Conan. I've been playing a bit of Conan Exiles lately, which is a blast if you like survival games. It's got a couple things in it, and
I've always seen stuff of that. I've never actually played it. It didn't, from the very limited gameplay that I've seen, it did not seem like my type of game. Things have to be like really specific for a survival game to grab me.
It's
yeah,
one of those games where it's like the Minecraft kind of survival where you're like scavenging and building shit. Not quite Minecraft where you dig around and stuff, but what is that called? That particular genre of survival?
I believe you'd probably just call it survival craft, to be totally honest.
Survival craft. Okay.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me that like you're not sure because you have like everybody scrutinizing every possible genre and subgenre, but we'll just call this one survival, maybe survival craft or something.
Yeah. It has like a little bit like it's got I wouldn't say like where you would consider Minecraft's combat like simplistic. It has like, a little bit more like Dark Souls-y combat. It
Okay.
takes a couple things like you can climb, so you could like scale like mountains or climb like tall walls or other people's structures and things like that. You can just kind of like stick to the wall and
Verticality.
experiment. Yeah.
And is
There's a
that
lot of
by default?
verticality.
Because like I know you
Yes.
play with a lot of mods.
Yes, I do. I do mod it substantially to add things to it as well. But
Mm.
they've been adding a lot of stuff, and they've added a couple of things that I've admittedly ignored, like
I
the
mean,
battle bans.
it's not like you ever completed the game or anything. Plus, I mean, it is a game they've added a lot to. I remember reading about that game in a Game Informer. Like it's pretty old.
Oh,
They've been adding to
Jesus.
it for a
Oh,
while.
yeah.
I missed Game Informer. That was.
Yeah,
I really love Game Informer.
yeah. I used to. What I used to get those with your GameStop subscription or
Yeah,
whatever, right?
man, that was
Yeah.
like the shit every month.
I think they still do it for.
I think they probably do. You probably have to
Yeah.
pay like a premium or something.
Yeah,
for
I think
print
it's like if you're
copies.
in like the upper tier power up card or something. Yeah, but yeah, Game Informer's
Yeah.
neat. I have a ton of those in the basement, like pretty much every one I've ever had.
You still have yours?
Of course, why not? Dude, that's gaming history.
I don't know, man.
People collect TV
I
guides.
don't
I'm not allowed to
disagree.
collect my goddamn Game Informers.
No. Look. I'm jealous. I'm just saying. Like, it's been so long. I haven't seen one of those magazines in like at least 10, 15 years.
Yeah,
Something
I mean,
like that.
I think I was the
So
last
1991 with 10 print issues. Sorry, I just had to. I
No, go ahead.
needed to know. Or
Yeah.
35 for 20 print issues.
one.
I
Okay.
think I
That's the show on the main site.
I think I have like a drawer full of them somewhere in like my room that I just haven't really like. I've just been holding
they're
on to them just because
pro-
I'm like.
They're probably worth some money now, honestly.
There's a lot of
Like
a lot
the
of
older
neat
ones?
Yeah, there's I'm sure somebody's willing to pay for a collector's item. There's quite a few of them that have like information on games that were canceled and things that just never materialized. But yeah, they're nice, they're cool, and I think I was the last one of this particular group to have an active Game Informer subscription. So I have some of the later ones too.
I wouldn't doubt it.
So Conan Exiles.
Yeah. Anything else, Joseph?
Um, I haven't actually played it yet because I think it just came out recently. But if you've ever heard of Dwarf Fortress, they
Yeah, I
Just-
just saw they had like a big update or something.
yes, they just if you know anything about Dwarf Fortress, it's a colony sim game, which it's very old, or at least it
The
looks
game
old. I
itself
think
is old.
yeah, well, it was I'm not
I
entirely
think it's
sure
from
of
the
the
last.
history of how
I,
old it is.
I think it's from the
It,
last
I don't
it,
think it's
decade. It
that
just
old.
it strikes you as old because it's got a very rudimentary like heads up
it,
display. Like it's very
it
basic graphics and the rest of it's text.
yes. So it
Um,
actually inspired Minecraft. So it's at least as old
Is
as
it that
Minecraft. That I
old?
know.
I thought it was
wait,
like
hold
Yes.
last
on.
decade, or maybe
Wait,
it boomed in
on
the last
Steam,
decade.
release date is listed as 2022.
Right. So there was a previous release of it.
Oh,
That one was, I believe it might have been free, but it was basically like an ASCII art sort of thing, where like the entire
Oh,
interface of the game was
okay,
ASCII art,
got
and
it.
okay.
they
All
That
and they
right.
makes a bit
had
more
I'm
sense.
saying.
and then they
Yeah.
had an eventual Steam release where they started to use like sprites for like all the different like characters and shit, and made it much more readable, which was
Okay,
like
so
I probably
Gotcha.
admittedly I wouldn't have considered it without it. So
yeah.
but I started playing it like a while ago, and I like it. It's a lot of dumb fun, and like they say that losing is fun, and it's probably has something to do with like how crazy
Losing
and
is
like
cool.
and in depth the story generation sort of is. Like it basically procedurally generates like an entire continent and like
That's cool.
history to go with it, and then like the movements of things and stuff like that. But it's a colony
Huh.
sim game, and they just recently released a an update, or more specifically a beta, where there is instead of like it being like a colony sim where like all the different dwarves or whatever, they're not like sims where you can, you know, they're kind of I guess you can kind of call them like sims, so to speak, because like they'll just kind of do whatever they want, but they will kind of listen to what you tell them to do.
Okay.
Adventure mode is the thing that they just released in their beta, which is more or less you're controlling like very specifically one party of like characters or adventurers, or like one character more specifically, I guess, depending on who you get to go with you and shit like that. But it
Okay.
has like this kind of like text-based like grappling system, like you can aim at it.
Hmm.
It's a sort of turn-based sort of thing, and it looks very interesting, and I've been dying to try it. It's probably one of the only things that can run on my crappy laptop. So, um,
So,
you know,
Conan Exiles and the pending Dwarf Fortress.
right.
So, Anthony, what have you been playing as of late?
I put down Dragon's Dogma 2 for a bit. Not that I'm bored of it. It's just it's dense. It's a lot to get into, but I've been making progress on that.
You dense motherfucker. I'm sorry. I couldn't.
No, that's one of the first things that come to mind too. But yeah, so I put that down for a bit and then I went back and I wrapped up Persona 3 Reload, which
Okay, yeah, I saw you playing a bunch of that lately.
yeah, after finishing it, I've got to say I fine game, but it's not the game it needed to be. Unfortunately, glad I got it for free, and it's one of the few games that has like all the DLC for free. So when it does its expansion in the fall, I'll go back and I'll wrap that up. Other than that, fighting games. Been playing more Marvel vs. Capcom 3. I also I went back and played the older Guilty Gear games, specifically Plus R and Exard. Those are a lot of fun. Just they don't really make them like that anymore. So it's just rotation of fighting games and dense RPGs for me lately.
All right, so nothing really out of the ordinary.
Nothing out of the ordinary.
I have been, I mean, pretty much status quo.
If you say Helldivers
Destiny
again,
came
I'm
out
gonna
with
flip the fuck out.
Well, I mean, I have been playing Helldivers.
As I was saying that, he's like, I'm like, what am I going to lead with, Helldivers or Destiny 2? Which one should I bitch about first? And you led with Destiny. You got my wires crossed. All right, go ahead. Tell me about how you volunteered in the mines.
Oh my fucking god! You know what? I've been playing some Destiny. It's been fun. I'll move on. I've also been playing Helldivers as well, because it's Helldivers, just a good time. Beyond that, I've been dipping a toe into the Steam FPS Fest and downloading a bunch of demos and trying out a bunch of shit. It's been fun. I like to see what all of the indie developers are doing with in the first-person shooter realm. I was playing this game earlier today called oh Jesus, what the hell? Something Realm, I think. Of course, it's not on my laptop. Recent games. But I tried Hellbreach Vegas as well. It's like this and the game that I was trying to think of before. They're basically if somebody took like the COD Zombies mode and like kind of fleshed it out more, added somewhat of like a roguelite element to Skur Ritual. That's what it's called. Skur Ritual. Because it's all round based. You can play with friends. Has upgrades around the map. You can open up new areas in the map. Like it's literally zombies, but just not COD.
Gotcha.
And I've been finding myself yearning for that type of game mode again because they took it out of Modern Warfare 3, unfortunately, and we might never see. I don't know. You heard the reports when Modern Warfare Zombies came out that it was like the most engaged with third mode COD had. So like now I'm concerned that we'll never get a wave-based version again.
Well,
So-
I'm sure we'll see a wave-based Call of Duty Zombies again, but I don't think it's going to happen in Modern Warfare 3. I don't think that's.
Well, no, not Modern Warfare 3.
yeah,
Treyarch is on deck, so maybe them.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm sure it'll come back. I'm just saying, that's the unfortunate reality about Call of Duty games is that like third modes like that, like they don't really get the cherry on top kind of content patch at the end anyway. So it's like you have this. We're not going to add like they could feasibly chop up the map and make wave based zombies. They're not going to do that. That would be giving you far too much for your money. So
that would be like a really easy solution and something to appease almost everybody, but they would never. They would never do that, which is a goddamn shame too.
It reminds me of Call of Duty Cold War. When Call of Duty Cold War was the new one, if you looked in the files, you could find like you know how the first map in Cold War it was like Nocturne Toten, but it was also like this huge like area around it and an underground bunker and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Files,
we did play like a decent amount of Cold War.
No, we did. No, I'm not knocking on Cold War, but what I'm getting at is in the files, like there were references and strings related to like a standalone Nocturne Toten, where like it would take the existing map assets and you could just play the original, but there's no incentive to do that because they have like their very strict plans that are designed to be divvied out a certain way to bring you back and only have a certain amount of content.
Yeah, that's all, really.
Yeah, but so Steam sale stuff's fun.
Yeah, Steam sale stuff it's always a good time to just like dive in there and see what's new and what's on sale because they run sales constantly. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much everything that I've been playing. That and Darktide, but we'll get to that. And I'm waiting until next week to jump back into Remnant 2 because they're getting a new DLC.
That's right.
Less than a week at this point.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So moving on from what we've played this week, what would you like to cover first, Anthony? I'll give you the reins.
Well, what I just want to touch on because we were just talking about Call of Duty and how like they don't really add more than they need to or more beyond their plans. It reminds me of a particular issue, something I heard about, and I'm sure you heard about, and Joe probably also heard about. The former president of Blizzard came out and said that he had this epiphany, this experience. I guess he had free time that week or something where he sat down and he played video games, and the experience was just so eye-opening and enlightening to him that he said, when a game just sits well with me and it leaves me in awe, I just wish I could tip the developers.
That's right.
Yeah. And I'm just sitting here thinking,
what world are you living in?
He's like, let me read what he said.
Island.
What he said verbatim. At the end of the game, I've often thought, I wish I could just give these folks another $10 or $20 because it was worth more than my initial $70. And I'm just sitting there.
He got roasted, didn't he?
Oh, of course he did. Do you think? Listen. First of all, we're still in that era where we've really just moved from $60 to $70 games, and that's still like an uphill thing. We talk all the time about how AAA development is bloated. We just got done talking about how they have a very strict like way that they divvy out their content so that they're not giving you too much and they're doing just enough to keep you there. You think I want to add tipping on top of that? I'll tell you where the tip should come from if you really want to. That $30 to $35 bundle in the Call of Duty store, that's your tip. All right, is if I go into like a store, like if you do DLC and I decide to pay for the DLC, that's the tip. And people will make the argument with you as like, oh, well, that's not tipping. That's just that, that money doesn't go to the developers. I'm like, that sounds like a bureaucratic issue. That sounds like an issue up top that needs to be settled. You don't take more money or imply that I should tip, because you know how I am with tipping in normal life. You think I want to tip in my fucking video games?
Can we not? Fucking Mr. Pink, everybody.
Yeah, fucking listen. I understand that can be like I can be a bit of a dick with the tipping. You think I want to tip video games? Like, you think I want to throw in an extra 20? My favorite games I haven't played, I'm not even going to throw my favorite games under the bus here. I haven't played a single game in the last 10 years where I sat there going, wow, I wish I could just give you more money. It's like, no, I played the game, I enjoyed it. You have my respect if I enjoyed the game, but there's no way in hell that I'm going to throw more money at you. And on top of that, there is no way in hell that I would trust any system you put in front of me that said, just insert your money here, it'll go to the right people. Not happening. Sorry.
Just trust us.
Fuck that.
Yeah.
Fuck that.
Yeah, so, that whole tipping thing, what a crock of shit.
Yeah,
man.
and I just it's a like, listen, I get it. He's not with Blizzard anymore. He works at Microsoft now, but it's just amazing to me. I know people can just be people, but the fact that this guy sounded so out of touch. It sounded like like a fucking politician sitting there like, oh, this is good for you. Why don't you just do this? Like, he sat down and he made it sound like he had like a religious epiphany. It made it sound like he's never played video games before and he just discovered it for the first time. And he's just like, I just wanted to give them more money.
The context, like, in general, it's just like, it's a guy who, allegedly was in front of a company who made video games, just being like, hey, you should give us more money. Go fuck yourself. It's not even like a completely unrelated person just being like, yeah, I like this a lot.
Somebody who directly benefited from the profits made from video games was like, hey, I know what we should do.
It's like, buddy, you work more money. I know you're not at Blizzard, and I know Microsoft does a lot of like they do a lot of things, but you're still like, you're in the industry. You can't really stand there saying, like, you're not shoulder to shoulder with me saying we should tip these guys a bit more. Don't you think they deserve more money? You're over there, and it's the same shit with tipping in a restaurant, because like the shady restaurants, or it's kind of commonplace depending on where you go, where like you tip, but they're supposed to give the tip to the manager so that they divvy it out across everybody. So it's just like I said, I don't trust that. Even if I was in some kind of fugue state where I wanted to insert more money into my console to make sure that, like, I was just wowed to that, like, I was just like, I wept from this video game that I just needed to give people more money. Like, even then, even if you somehow got me to that point, there's no way the money's going to the people who should be getting it. That's the first thing that came to mind when we were talking about chopping up games and not necessarily supporting them just for the fact of supporting them, but for, like, nickel and diming you and giving you just the right amount of content, But yeah, that's the first thing that came to mind.
It's all fucking gross.
It is. Come on. We are not even in the right. Like, that's like a high trust society kind of thing. We're so far from that. Not happening. Call me again in like 35 years and I'll humor you. Maybe I'll give you like a nickel or something, and then you can fuck off. Yeah,
a whole nickel.
Yes. So that's Mike Ybarra, however you pronounce your last name. Meet me in 35 years. We'll talk then.
Well, that was a lively segment. Tipping in video games.
Not gonna happen.
The $30 skin that costs half of the price of the fucking game. That's just like, I want to look cool. That's your tip, asshole. Have a good one. What's next?
Just that.
What do we got?
People who already do that anyway, but.
Oh yeah, just buy the skins. Yeah, I'm one of those assholes. Are the ones that I like.
There's people who
Within
already go out of
reason.
their way to send people money as a
Here's
donation. So
You know
here's
what
I'll say.
you know what I've actually
To-
dumped a lot of money into, like
What?
as far as microtransactions go, that
What would
I
that be?
that I don't necessarily feel like that bad about. It's been Dark Tide. Like the premium currency that you need to buy the cosmetics, on average, I would say they're like 25% cheaper than like COD points. It's not like Helldivers level of reasonable, but it's still way more digestible to spend the money on the Dark Tide Aquilas that they're called, as opposed to like $20 for one skin. I'll spend $20 in Dark Tide, and I'll be able to get like a full armor set, and then which I can mix and match with different shit, and then like a weapon skin and like a trinket or something. But it's way more, I would say, fair than a lot of the other games that I play that huck the microtransactions in your face. I don't know why I felt the need to say that.
No, that it's important to kind of clarify, because obviously, like, rule of thumb is that most people don't like microtransactions, and for good reason. I do think that in a sense, you know, not that I'm saying it's like tipping, but like if you cultivate that kind of audience that likes your game, in a situation where like the consumer is trusting of you and you're putting your best foot forward to create content, that relationship that doesn't guarantee but makes everybody comfortable in the aspect of DLC and expansions and small like cosmetics and things like that. Like that's the best you should be hoping for in that scenario. Not free handouts, not blind faith, but it's like you are making a good product. You have that trust and you treat your customers, these gamers, fairly. That's how you keep that money going. So like in on its face, I don't hate like what you just said to me. If you like Dark Tide and they're giving you content and you want to put money into it because you like the game, that's a good thing. You know, not everything like you get gameplay stuff for free. You log in like, ooh, an update. Like, oh, look at all this is amazing, and then you spend money on like the system works. You know, right. Everybody's happy.
Yeah.
So like that's you know, I just wish that was more the norm. You know, because that's.
Yeah, unfortunately,
that's how you because like systems like this don't evolve unless you have the current system in place and functioning, and the current system is good games, good support, and then like robust in-game options both for free and paid, and that's how you end up with a healthy relationship where you have good customers that spend their money on things they see that are worth it, and the game grows appropriately and accordingly.
Agreed.
Yeah, there's a couple of ways to do monetization, and a lot of I think it's something that kind of exists on a spectrum from like really horrible, awful ones to ones that I would personally say are good, like the way Warframe does it, which they
the Warframe system is solid. I will give you that.
Yeah, it's probably I haven't really seen like a sort of MMO or multiplayer game with one that's quite as like forgiving for people who don't really want to spend that much money. But they kind of sort of they let people who do spend money on it, like so to speak, like kind of make up for the people who don't in the way that they make everything tradable between players. And it's most of like the cash shop stuff is like you can get it by more or less just by playing the game and just kind of interacting with the other players by giving them things that they need. They'll, and it's relatively easy as well. It's not even like, it's not like if you were to play like a game like WoW or something, you might notice, or I think like maybe RuneScape does the same thing, like where they kind of let you pay for like your subscription time with like in-game currency, and then those prices seem to inflate depending on how many people like are playing. But platinum is always very, very reasonable.
Yeah, I remember Warframe is one of the few games that I have spent money on outside of I mean it's free to play, but like, I put like 30 hours into it without spending a dime, and then I got to a point where it was like I want a new frame, and I just bought it. It was like what, $10, something like that. It really wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
So Warframe it does have a pretty good system. All right, so microtransactions, they suck and no one likes them. What's next?
So there's, I mean, I don't know exactly which one you want to get into, because this week has been, and even this has been a problem for a while, but this week in particular has been hitting a few companies pretty hard, and so in the week prior too. But there's a lot of issues of trust in companies when it comes to products and law. But I mean, like we just got done with no, because we just got done with the one that's like the oldest and something we've been dealing with for a while, where it's monetary trust and like, are you getting what you're paying for, or do they have your best interest? But now we're talking about like we've been talking about the last couple months, trust within the product itself, not the quality, but like believability in things like lore and dialogue and how companies handle it. And there were two big ones in particular that kind of spin off into their own tangents, but then also kind of come together. One is pretty near and dear to you, less so me, with the Warhammer 40K stuff and how the lore's kind of got shook a little bit. And the other side of the spectrum, something it matters a bit more to me, and a lesser extent to Joe, but like he kind of understands what's going on, with Capcom, and it's most recently part of its team, the Localization team, came out and did this whole like massive statement about how they localize games that didn't really instill trust in anybody, and kind of highlighted a lot of issues that people were kind of privy to, but always you get fan people denying that it happens or whatever. So which one do you want to talk about first?
We could talk about the fighting game one. I know which one you're talking about.
So
get the Warhammer after.
Okay, so it's not so much a fighting game thing, but it's a universal thing. So we've talked about this briefly, and Joe is a bit more privy, I'm sure, to it. But are you familiar with what localization is?
Not in the sense that I think you're referring to. So explain.
So localization is essentially the process of taking a game that is in a language. In this case, we'll just use this example as Japanese, but it really applies to anywhere that needs to be translated, and and translating it to in this case, the local. Yes, but here's the thing. So you'll notice I said translation, but the profession, the thing that is actually done, is called localization. And translation is simple. You know what translating is. Translating from one language to the other. Localization is kind of this amorphous term that like changes depending on what decade of culture you happen to be in, right? Mm-hmm. Essentially, what the idea is that it's like, oh, this joke has to do with Japanese culture, so it doesn't really work. We got to change it to something else. Or, oh, this references a location in Japan that people overseas may not understand, so we got to, change it. And on paper, that sounds nice, right? Like you make it so that like you can understand something without necessarily needing to look at like a translator's note or reading up on cultural history and stories like that, right? Like on paper, that sounds right to you, correct?
Yeah.
It has not been that simple for like 20 years. And in the last 10 years, it's gotten particularly egregious, because basically what typically happens is you have these people, they squeak their way into these companies, or they squeak their way into these contracts, and they mangle these stories and these characters and the intent. So like the biggest thing I like to put forward is you kind of know how a lot of anime, as you probably noticed growing up, some of them seem a little kooky, a little wacky, or they have like these quirks. A lot of that is just Americanization of it from these kind of companies. So like if you ever saw an anime on a Saturday morning cartoon and you thought it was a little wacky or out there, don't get me wrong, some of that is there, but a lot of that has to do with these people translating it a certain way and changing the meaning behind certain things. And what that's led to is like ridiculous Marvel-esque quirkiness in a lot of these things. If you have sensitive topics related to like gender, like women aren't shown in a good light, so we got to remove this dialogue altogether, and you'll have something like for example, if you have a medieval setting where a guy is being demeaning to a woman because that's how people were back then. There's that power structure between man and woman. They'll change the dialogue so it's not even there, or they'll make the guy look like a dunce or something like that. Lately, there's been a whole thing, obviously with the whole gender shit going on. You have, men that are a bit more effeminate get turned into gay men or trans women, or you have, you've had games that they'll literally take white characters and make them black. You have all these really crazy things that have been going on in the localization industry, and what always happens is you always get into arguments with people that say like, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't read Japanese, so you can't tell it's wrong." Even though you'll have like a literal translation in front of you, and then you'll have like the dialogue next to it that got translated for you and put in the game, and you'll be like, "Hey, I may not know how to speak Japanese, but I have this verified translation, and I have the product that it was given to me, and it's wrong," but they'll just lie to your face and say it's not happening. So what Capcom did, their localization team did, they came out recently and they said, we need to be culturally sensitive. Character design and development must be culturally sensitive. If it's not acceptable, it might need to be changed. We play a crucial role in making sure these things are appropriate for certain. Crucial role. And you have localization efforts extend to promoting inclusivity through language. I'm reading a lot of this verbatim. Like this is the shit they say. It's just like, we got to address gender-specific language and cultural norms and diverse perspectives. We got to create an immersive experience that's the same, but we got to change it. That's the kind of shit that they spin. Now, why a lot of people started paying attention to this in particular is because, like I said, there is always a group of people out there that will just argue to the death, like the brain dead activist types online that are like social justice warriors or virtue signalers. They will defend this stuff to the death, even when like the stuff is put directly in front of your face, right? And yeah. I'm sure I don't need to tell you guys about these kind of mindsets. They just have no standards, right? It's one thing to look at the shit I say, because I'm a bit of a hard ass. I'm critical when it comes to certain things.
You're more than a bit of a hard ass. I'm sorry
yes,
to break it to you.
that's yeah. But I'll look at especially with like shit like remakes and respecting lore over sequels and polish and what people should expect. I'm very critical. Not everyone is going to be like me and like dock points if a remake changes a single line, even though they really should, or if a side character returns after 2 decades and acts completely differently, and they just say, "Oh, it's just an anime character, you don't care." I think they should care. The issue with localizing games from different countries, especially from Japan, it's entirely different because the people are so blatant with lying or just being completely and totally ignorant. It's like, imagine you're trapped in a burning building, right? It's a building you've lived in for quite some time. You like it there. This is a building you've lived in for a long time. You like, and it's your home. And this is a building that you watched get set on fire. The arsonist is in eyeshot. The gear he used is visible. You've got a pretty good case. And you will point to that man and you will shout, "The building is on fire. That guy over there, he's responsible. He did it." And before you can even finish talking, one of these people will crawl out of the burning woodwork and respond that not only is the building not on fire, but that you are the worst type of person they've ever met for even mentioning the possibility that the building could be set on fire by somebody. And before they're done telling you that, they themselves will be set on fire by the same arsonist who set the building on fire, who is now shouting, "I set this building on fire." Now, forced to acknowledge that the building is indeed on fire and confronted with the arsonist responsible, that same person will look you dead in the eye and will tell you one or all of the following. The building is better on fire. The building has always been on fire. You never belonged in the building to begin with, and you are actually the problem, not the building being on fire. these people are so disingenuous and awful when it comes to this shit. It's remarkable. There have been so many examples of fan translations versus, you know, official translations, and you're just like, wow, there's something wrong here, or like they've rewritten characters, or they've rewritten entire intent, or they've changed the entire way this character acts. And even in its most benign, it's making these games less interesting, or, you know, making them laughing stocks. Like, I think a part of the reason that people have this view of Japanese media in general, I mean, this applies to anywhere, but we focus on Japanese because that's a big market, is a part of the reason that people look at that and kind of scoff, like, oh, it's wacky, or oh, they don't talk right, or they're weird, is because of these bad localizations. It really should just be translations, and hopefully with AI getting as big as it is, it you know, we start to see some shifts in that. But the reason that things are the way that they are is because the Japanese guys don't always have an eye on their property. There's an incredibly harsh disconnect between the people who make the game, who are passionate or at least craftsmen of some respect, and the people who actually are handed these games to translate. Because if you look at any amazing game out there, normally there's passionate people behind it, or people who have been in the industry for a while, or just talented individuals. Then you have the localizer. 95% of them are bottom rung translators. This is a well-known fact in the industry, is if you can translate a language well, you don't go into entertainment. You go into legal work. Like you go into you go into politics. Like, you'll translate speeches, or you'll go and you'll translate really dense mechanical manuals, like important work that you can't screw up.
Really dense mechanical. That was like really specific.
Because it could be any manual, but I'm saying, like, you know, industrial stuff.
Well, that's the
like
thing that needs like really specific instructions.
Exactly.
So the translation's got to be perfect. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, so you're left with these talentless people. A lot of them are failed writers that just want to supply. Like, honestly, if nobody's watching these people, they will just write their own stories on top of them, because people, like, there's very little double checking. And so basically all this boils down to is it's just another confirmation in a long series of like guesswork, where companies just don't know what they're doing with overseas stuff. It kind of falls into all like the inclusivity and the same kind of stuff that leads into the consulting companies that we've been talking about, because these same people have the same connections and the same stuff. But what's happening now is a lot of these people move to Japan and work their way up into the company. And why they do that is it's cheaper for the Japanese guys to just say, oh, we have it in-house, and it's supposed to build like, oh, you can't question the changes. The guys did it in their own in-house studio. And then, like, you look at the team that developed it, it's all a bunch of Japanese guys. And then you look at the translation team, and it looks like some tanned Californian and a fucking, you know, scrawny white guy and freaking some Indian guy. And it's just like, well, that's what happens with the translations, and it really shakes the faith in a lot of how these stories are told, because it's like they keep chipping away. It's like, at first it's like, oh, we're gonna nickel and dime you, and then, oh, we're gonna you know, we're not gonna hire the best people, so the games aren't getting made well. And now in this aspect, a lot of these games that avoid all of that nonsense and then get imported to other countries are now being changed by the same kind of activists to fall more in line with that. And they're just going to keep changing more and more and get closer to the ear of the developers more and more. Like, it's already to the point where these people, they won't get the game at the end of the development process. They will get builds of the game early and say stuff like, oh, you know, this might be seen as offensive in some languages, or, oh, that skirt's too short, or, oh, you know, that this woman character is not shown in a great light, and stuff like that. And it just keeps escalating. And near the bottom of this thing from Capcom, they actually mention, you know, that it's not limited to story. Like, they go as far as potentially changing gameplay if it's found to be offensive. So we'll see where that goes, but that was
some description, and I don't even know where to even fucking begin, because I feel like it's all just the dollars and cents thing at the end of the day anyway.
Yeah, it's something that more people are being privy to, but it's like all the issues we've been talking about the last couple weeks. It's when they get brought to light, when they get shown, they are just going to dig in and get aggressive before they're out entirely. So they're starting now. There being a lot of companies like this are going to be open about it until it really hurts them, or until they literally just can't hide from it anymore. And unfortunately, Capcom for me is entering their next dark age. Like they had one that ran during their outsourcing period that kind of ended around 2017. And I'm glad Dragon's Dogma 2 came out. I'm worried about future projects from them, but we'll take it game at a time. But this does not bode well for the localization industry in general, because there's already tons of people like this on a smaller scale that tweet about how they would love to change the games more, and how they virtue signal to all their friends, and it's another thing that's just subverting the creative process and damages the integrity of the games. And speaking of damaging the integrity of the games, Dan, if you would like to talk about the other thing I mentioned.
The whole Warhammer debacle. So I didn't even know this was going on until you messaged me like out of the blue, and I had no fucking clue, because I was never like a huge social media person, and you said that like this was a fucking war that was going on Twitter, basically. Yeah. And I had no idea that it even existed, and I play a lot of Darktide. But so you said that people are upset that in this most recent update for Darktide, titled The Path of Redemption, which is actually very, very good, and we'll get to that in a second, but the core of this is that they overhauled the penance system. So like there's way more to do in the game, like during the mission to mission gameplay and between the different classes that you play as. But the record keeper is female, and you said that that was this problem in the 40K. So basically what I'm getting at, or what I should mention with the 40K stuff is, it's not so much that there are females in 40K, because when I brought this to your attention, you had already mentioned, there's females here, there's females there. It's not that there's females or any kind of women in the 40K universe. What the problem is, for the last 3 years, about maybe even just 2 years, there's been a push by people who are getting into the hobby, and not even really getting into it, but the kind of people that like to orbit things and try to sink their talons into it. They've been pushing a long time. They want female Space Marines. They said, "Oh, you got to do it. It's got to be inclusive. Why can't there be female Space Marines?" And the answer has always been there are female factions, female-only factions within the 40K universe, right? Actually, one of my favorite factions happens to be an all-female faction. It's just fucking cool, and I like it. But it's not, and they're not Space Marines.
Is that? What faction is that?
The Sisters of Battle.
Yes, that's the one that got put around. Like, that's the one that gets brought up a lot. And
because they're just warrior nuns, and some of them in the lore can even go toe to toe with Space Marine. Like, this is ridiculous.
And that's cool. That's awesome. Yeah. And it's a lore thing, and it's fine. And so the entire time that people have been fighting for female Space Marines, like any fandom thing, there's always an argument about gatekeeping and like trying to keep people out of if you want to change it, you probably don't belong here. And so you mentioned, there are certain characters in Darktide, right? That female characters. To my knowledge, nobody has had a single issue, because there was nothing that broke lore in there. Most people.
So I'm not going to say that I'm like a big expert on 40K lore, because I'm really not. I really enjoy the universe, and I actually just finished a 40K book. But I'm not an expert by any stretch. Like, that universe is massive.
And that's perfectly fine. And I'm not a huge guy. I'm not a huge lore guy either. Most of my knowledge is just I read up on this and understand it. Like, I don't have a problem with female characters in the universe either. Like, I wasn't sitting there finding the whoever was calling me to the bridge that one time, or the shopkeep that's talking to me.
One of your commanding officers is female.
Yeah. One of the 3 characters I made is female. I don't give a shit about that, as long as my whole thing is
my Psyker's a female.
Yeah. So so here's the thing. You like 40K more than I do. I've enjoyed the game from what I've played. I think both of us don't have a problem with that, but what we do have a problem with is if you or I, or I'll speak for myself and you can confirm, is if I hear about something where the lore is either disregarded or not, or mistreated, I lose faith in a brand, in a company, in a game, if that's the way that it is. Like I don't want to get invested into something that they themselves don't take seriously, especially if it's in favor of catering to these people. And so what ended up happening is the custodians, right?
Adaptations, custodies.
The custodies. I've heard it both ways. Is it custodians? Is it custodians? Is one short for the other?
It's not. I don't think they say custodians. I think. Well, I guess you can, but every time I've ever seen it, it's always been the Adeptus Custodies.
Okay, so you have the custodies, and the way that the lore was read was just like for generations. It's they take the various sons of these groups and they genetically modify them from birth to be the perfect soldiers, right? And
in my understanding, it was because the Emperor had all the Primarchs are the sons of the Emperor that have their own Space Marine faction. So, Anyway.
So generally, like without crossing the streams here of both of our knowledge, just because I don't, obviously you're getting into it. I'm going off of what I read on the situation. Is so basically, so this new codex entry or some kind of entry in new lore came out. And just offhand, it mentions, that it's a woman. It's just like, oh, she did this or she did that. It's like a paragraph long. And immediately people start to take issue. Like, you have the people that have been circling, trying to get their way in, wedge their way in, are already doing victory laps, right? Because they see this. They don't care about the lore. They just care about infiltrating the lore and infiltrating the thing. And then you have a couple lore buffs come out and say, like, hey, this doesn't sound right. If you're going to do it, you can't do it this way. And official Warhammer accounts on social media started blocking these people. Like, they didn't address it. I'm sorry, they did address it. Here's what they said. They said,
"Oh boy,
since the very beginning, there has always been." Joe, I don't know if you have the official quote. If you don't, that's
always
fine.
Been female custodes or whatever.
Yeah, they basically said since the very first, there have always been female custodes, and like. Everybody's like, well, that's bullshit.
They've never been written about.
They've never been written about. They've never been mentioned. It's never happened. So the general consensus is, if need be, you could write it in. Like I saw somebody recommend it. It's just like with the the certain battles on certain fronts were getting intense, and there weren't enough sons, so they turned two daughters as well. Like people seemed to be okay with that concept. It would be a little shoehorned.
Right, and that's the thing. Generally, people will be okay with that, but like there's got to be a legitimate lore reason as to why you're going to just make this change. And the thing that I love so much about Warhammer is that it's a tabletop game, and yes, they have a ton of different video games, but they're all based off of the backbone that is the incredibly detailed lore. Like, I've never read a fucking Warhammer book until a couple weeks ago, but I like the game so much, and just the universe of Warhammer is so fucking cool to me, and it's so unbelievably detailed, and the wiki is just a well that I could never reach the bottom of. I wanted to just read a story in the Warhammer universe, but like for them to do that, saying that it's always been that way, when the first shred of evidence was in the new codex, and it was one paragraph long, like that is just fucking disingenuous also. Like, I don't have a problem with female Space Marines, but if you're going to do it in Warhammer especially, you need to give me a reason as to why they exist, not just because, they're there because they're there.
So I'll be honest, once again, this is coming from somebody who is very cursory as far as the experience with 40K, but with Space Marines, it's pretty much hard-coded to be males. So, like, I would, if that ever were to change, I would take that as a glaring red flag as somebody who's just cursed. Like, I wouldn't want to invest in that just because...
Wait, why is it okay for the custodies to be female but not...
Because... I'm trying to think. I remember reading up on this. There's better lore reasons that I saw for there never being female Space Marines, while there could be other factions within it that work. I don't want to get too deep into it because, like I said, this is outside of my realm. I'm just saying I'm not gonna sit here like and pretend to be a lore buff and say it absolutely shouldn't happen and I will hold the gate, because that's not me. I'm just saying, based on the explanations that have been given to me, if I were to ever see that, it would mean that somewhere along the line somebody buckled and the lore is no longer as important as it used to be to them. Like, that's my understanding of the situation.
Which is fair.
There are more lore reasons for there not to be female Space Marines than there are for female custodes. That's my understanding.
Okay.
Of the situation is it makes more sense for the custodians.
Like, I haven't gone out of my way to really read up on why that is. And when I first installed the update and this new record keeper was female, like I thought nothing of it. I didn't care. And then you told me about this whole bullshit going on. I'm like, come on, man. Like, can I just have the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war? Like, it's in the fucking slogan.
Because here's the thing, Dan. Like, whether you're a lore buff that's been in it for decades, whether it's somebody like you who's very interested in getting more invested into it, or whether it's somebody like me who is just on the fringe that likes to enjoy it from time to time, these people hate all three groups. They want to take this from you, and they want to show that they could just change it. They are miserable people that need to dig into everything and change it. Because I remember once I was told, a couple podcasts ago, we were talking about something where it's just like, if I come across something that I do not like, or I look at it and I say, like, this doesn't fit my worldview, I never say, you need to change for me. Absolutely. It's like you take the good with the bad. You just move on
to something that you like.
Exactly. Like, if I walk up to something that's just clearly not for me, I don't say change the thing for me, because that's you're going to give me something half-assed and you're going to change what made your thing special. Not everything needs to be for everybody. Not everything needs to have some kind of message, and not everything needs to align with whatever the correct line of thinking is. So basically what I'm getting at is, whether it's localization or internal things, it's like you need to stay true to the creative process and what you're making. There can't be you can't have people chiseling away at the lore, or people getting their hands on it and mangling it in the translation process. It's something that a lot of people do. They dig and they chip away until they get one pandering change, and then they use that as a wedge to flood in. They villainize all the people like you or me who either remotely care, whether it's Warhammer. This is a general thing, by the way. I'm not just talking about Warhammer, but they'll villainize all the people that were there. They'll lie about the situation and how it got to that point. And then at a certain point, if they're in there and you're in there and they're getting changes pandering to them, they'll just flat out say that the integrity of the series just never mattered in the first place, and that it's just like, it's just a game, or they're just toys. Why do you care? And there's also the weird aspect of it that really popped up with this. Happens in all of these changes, but with the 4K stuff is like there's a bit of fetishization going on with it, where they're just like, I don't know why you guys are so homosexual. Now this means you get to have 9 foot tall muscle mommies for your hobby. I'm just like, what the fuck? What are you talking about? Like, I just want like a good game. Just hearing you say
the term muscle mommy made my day.
I'm glad I could, because it felt it. I had to tear that one out to fucking say to you, because
coming out.
To be concise, what you're asking for is consistency.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's something that I've been harping on like every single issue that we've talked about so far on the podcast. I always say, it's just like, listen, some things may disagree with me. All I care about is consistency, staying true to your internal vision, and it's a process that's under attack constantly, be it on from
we actually talked about this like in the last episode, which was 2 or 3. I can't count that high.
It's 2 weeks ago. I know anything over 2 is tough for you.
I just can't. So, but we talked about it last time, because it's funny because it almost feels like a checklist. Like you're not even dealing with like normal, like regular, like actual people. Like it's almost like there's some kind of like flow chart to the arguments that always pop up whenever this shit happens. Because when we were talking about it 2 weeks ago or last week or whatever, it was we were talking about it, and I was ranting about Battlefield, and when I was saying that like Battlefield 5 was stupid and shitty, and they put all this nonsense in it and like kind of rewrote World War II into a way that didn't make sense, and people basically just belittled the genre of video games and any kind of or media in general, and just said basically fuck you, it's not real, so I can do whatever I want.
Mm-hmm.
And more or less that's kind of basically the exact thing that they say. They say, well, more or less the
It doesn't
analogy
matter anyway, so go fuck yourself.
right,
Yeah.
the analogy that you came up with the burning house, I was trying to say, like, that was basically that's basically what they do. They say one of
Yeah.
like four things. They say essentially like it's better this way. It was it was always this way, which may or may not be, but more than likely is not true.
Mm-hmm.
Or they
You're
say
a
that
terrible
like
person.
yeah, you're a terrible person for wanting anything else, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in regards to 40K, because the Imperium is like very kind of blatantly and notoriously racist. So I don't know why.
yes,
why
like,
Here's the thing, Joe. Here's the thing, Joe. You not wanting them, female characters, makes you sexist, and now that they are here and you still don't want them, makes you gay. That's
so I don't want a superhuman, like transhuman female space racist. That's what I need.
Yes.
Like
You're not wanting them
I'm
here
gay for
makes
not
you
wanting
sexist,
that.
and now that they're here and you don't like
Oh,
them, that
man.
makes you gay. So
I
that's
Yes. Fuck you.
the thirst for penis is just like it's materializing in my brain. It's manifesting. Oh my god.
Warhammer 40K inches.
And
It
listen,
doesn't-
listen. The second you stop being such a closeted homosexual, you'll realize 40K doesn't matter, and you can move on with your life.
Oh geez, dude, my asshole is loosening as we speak. It is really stupid.
Oh, you
It
just
is.
fucking just getting that KY ready. Just,
Yeah.
It's
See,
go ahead.
it comes from many different like sources, like and this is, I know this is supposed to be a video game podcast, but
Mhm.
for the thing is, this kind of happens in a lot of media, and it's not even necessarily always like a kind of like balancing the checkbooks, like social justice,
Mhm.
thing too. It actually happens in a lot of cases. Like, here's the thing: video games have like a very notorious like reputation for making horrible like movie adaptations, show adaptations, and things like that.
Speaking
not
of
even-
which, Fallout has been really good so far. Just we
Yes.
can talk about it later, but
I actually,
Yeah,
shut
it
up,
sucks.
Anthony. God,
Anthony, and listen, if you
does that not strike you as odd? As you're the only one that has these shit opinions sometimes.
hold on.
I'll
Alright,
carry
listen.
that cross.
Joe,
Let
finish
Joe
your
finish his
thought.
thing so we can
Okay,
argue about
yeah.
Fallout.
So here's the thing about like, and I thought Fallout was okay.
I never liked the games. Just
you're-
throwing that out there.
There you
maybe
go.
it's a
It was
result
made for you.
of the fact. Maybe it's a result of the fact that like I'm not totally addicted to Fallout games. As far as Bethesda games are concerned, I've always been more of a Elder Scrolls guy.
I'm the same way.
Didn't even
But
like those.
I've been like, I admittedly am not super keen on like guns in like RPGs where they don't kind of just like one shot people in the head. It's just a weird like quirk about me. I don't know what it is, but I've enjoyed Fallout sometimes, just not as much as other people. And I've read into it because I like the story of Fallout and everything. And I honestly, when I watched the show, I couldn't really find that there was that much wrong with it. But that's really besides the point. I thought the show was okay. What I thought was fucking horrible was the Halo show.
I haven't
That
even
was one of the
touched
worst-
season 2. I watched
dude.
episode 1 of season 1, and I'm like, nope, I'm done. I'm out. They got the BR sound wrong. This is stupid. I checked out. That was the straw that broke the camel's back for me.
What's the guy's name? Fucking Pablo Schreiber or something.
Yeah.
When he was like in that fucking cave looking at the Forerunner shit, and he like pulled out the fucking confused Batman voice, I was like, this is fucking stupid. This guy's an, like,
They had
like, no
such a good template to work with.
exactly. But
It was
this is
all right there.
this is the thing.
Fuck.
There's so many people who take a piece of media, and when someone who is a fan who may want consistency, and I'll give Anthony that there were certain things that were brought up that I'm not familiar with, but they bring up points that like I can't necessarily specifically, verify, but they were saying there's a guy who shows up, who's like a particular wealthy individual from I think Fallout New Vegas,
He's
and
from New
Wait, hold on.
Vegas.
This is something that happens in the show.
Yes.
yes, I'm
Okay,
not
hold on. So
spoiling it.
I've only seen the first episode, so
Okay.
just no
It-
spoilers, please.
Oh, so you
I
thought it
wasn't
was
gonna name.
amazing?
I wasn't gonna
I
name
thought it was
names,
a really good, strong first episode.
but they kind of go against his history a bit, and
Okay.
A bit.
well, the thing is, he seems to be it's hard to call him a minor character because again,
So he's not. Okay.
He's the best way I can put it. He's
All right.
he's
well,
technically a minor character. Like I don't want to go too far. I want Joe to make his point, but just to. Do you want to talk about Fallout now, or do you want to finish what you were talking about, Joe?
we don't have to really talk about Fallout. I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to spoil it for Dan.
Okay.
It's basically just that, like, there are very specific, like, I can appreciate that they at least picked a guy who kind of looks like him. They sort of retconned a tiny bit about this character and his background, or what his motivations were, as far as I could tell.
A bit more
but-
than a tiny bit. It's kind of like the entire way he acts, but
There's a
See, this means nothing to me because the last game that I
That's-
tried was Fallout 4,
and that's a
and
problem.
I didn't like it. Okay.
the thing is,
Like,
you didn't play in New Vegas, so
so
I don't
here-
know if you would even know who he is.
So all right,
like,
hold on.
so here's
So
the-
let
here's the
me
thing
let
about
me
it.
let me get this out of the way then.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
I am a gamer at heart, right? Like we all can agree to that, right?
Right.
I didn't like the Fallout games. They were never my speed. I've tried a few of them. I just never liked it. Now the Fallout show is out. I watched the first episode. I thought it was very strong. Now, granted, I'm a huge Walton Goggins fan. I think he's a phenomenal actor. And I am really interested in seeing the rest of the season. Now, this character that you're talking about that comes in is nothing like his video game counterpart. I can see why people would be very upset at that, but if I get up to this point in the show, this character shows up and he acts however he acts, and the show is still good, written well, performed well, like everything makes sense, nothing is stupid. Like I still can't give the show that much shit. Now, Halo, on the other hand, the writing was weak, the action was okay, like so many other things around like the game accuracy was fucking dog shit, which makes it a lot easier for me as a fan or otherwise to not like. So like,
So what
you see where I'm going with this a little bit?
So what here's the thing, and this is kind of my take about Fallout. I thought that Fallout was enjoyable because a lot of the characters in Fallout are original characters, so to speak,
Okay,
except for person A, who we're not discussing.
all right. But I guess it makes it a lot easier to watch a show about characters who you've never seen before, set in this universe that you love so much. Okay, yeah, that makes
Exactly.
sense.
That's the thing. It's an original. It's an original story, which it would have to
Right.
be because all the
Yeah.
Fallout games are RPGs. It's an original story, more or less written about original characters that exist within the universe, and most of the things that happen in game are kind of like, sort of like gameplay. I don't even know how you would fucking describe this, but like the Rad-X and shit and everything that
Wait,
you
Anthony,
use.
did you watch the whole show?
I did watch the whole show. I had to watch parts of
Wow,
it twice
okay.
because I
I
fell
had-
asleep during it, but I
Right.
watched it.
So
I had no
But-
idea that you watched the whole thing.
I had no
the point
intention
is
to,
that-
but somebody I knew wanted to watch it, so I watched it with them. And
the thing is, the show has like I said, it has all these original characters for the most part, and there is an inconsistency with the game on an established character, and I think that is what people are mostly taking issue with.
so
Okay.
There's some people who are upset about the main character. I thought she was okay, but the bigger issue with, in my opinion, with Halo, is that pretty much the entire cast is established characters except
Right.
for
Who
the weird
spit in
characters.
the fucking face
Right.
of the legacy that the game set up.
Right.
But-
And I think this kind of behavior stems from a feeling of, and I hate to like just kind of psychoanalyze, but I can only really see it this way, is that the people who make these things think that the original content, the original media, and the consistency of that is all bullshit and stupid, and whatever their ideas are just better. That's what they think. That's what they believe.
A lot of them are that way, especially
Well-
in like when I was talking about localizers earlier. A lot of them, like I mentioned, failed writers. A lot of these people, be it them doing adaptations into television and movies or translating work, a lot of them, it's a mixture of they never got their own thing going and they have to tell their own stories or want to try and tell their own stories through the IPs they've been handed. That happens all the fucking time with video game adaptations in film and television, which is why you get, more often than not, you get weird retellings of existing stories or characters in name only that are doing things wildly, drastically different than what you would expect.
Right. It's
my
just
heart.
it is, and it's painful to watch because people have wanted it for a long time. But at the same time, like I said, it's like it. That's I can't. It's really hard to imagine where the fuck else it could even possibly stem from, because when you have something successful that people like and they like the consistency of something.
Well, the only other thing that I could think of is that, and from what I've heard on different podcasts and shows and like behind the scenes footage that I've seen and blah 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 blah, these shows, it's not just granted, in a lot of cases the writers are to blame. Like in Halo, for example, all the writers and the showrunners, they literally said like they didn't want to follow anything that the game set up. Like they just wanted to do their own thing, which is its own problem. But a lot of times these producers or executive producers will come in and have their own idea that they think is better, that are funding the whole thing, and really are the ones that get to say at the end of the day. Now, I don't know. Obviously, that's not the issue with Halo. Like Halo, it's like a systemic fucking creatively bankrupt team that's making this shit. And I can't speak for Fallout because I'm not a fan of the game, so I have no horse in that race. But it doesn't always fall to the people who are crafting the story. I think a lot of times people want to feel important and that have money, that are not creative, that are producers, and will come in and say you have to do X, Y, and Z or else you're out of a job. But nobody wants to lose their fucking job, especially when they're getting to work on like these legendary IPs, and they could put that on a resume. I think that a lot of that comes into play. So I just think that has a lot to do with it. It's not always the writers, even though in the case of Halo, I think it is. But I think that's where a lot of the shit comes from.
Like even with like in like an anime sense, like that Cowboy Bebop Netflix show, like they just like
I was so looking forward to that, man.
I was, and they fucked it up.
That has a lot. That the funny thing about the Cowboy Bebop show is not only is it this situation where like these people just get this IP and do their own thing with it, despite the fact that it's a live action adaptation, retelling kind of thing, right? But it also has like despite there being an existing English script of it that came from a time where things were a little bit more trustworthy, if not perfect, they did a lot of the weird localization stuff that you would see today if they were translating from Japanese got done in this English retelling kind of thing. Like you had like all these characters acting like out of character and zany in a way they didn't do in any version, Japanese or English of the original. You have, this one soldier character who, as a result of experiments done to him, has these weird feminine traits about him, and it's like a really tragic story, and they turn him into like some brave trans representation like you would if you were just translating the character and putting words in his mouth. There's all these weird like zany camera angles because it's anime, so it's got to be wacky and shit like that. It's just they treated the whole thing like a joke, but that's a whole other thing.
And the video you sent me of Spike and what the fuck was his name? The pilot. What was his name?
You talking about Jet?
Jet, yes, thank you. Wow, I blanked on that for a second. Yeah, Jet Black. Yeah, when Jet and Spike are sitting at the diner, and somebody put the fucking Seinfeld laugh track.
Oh yeah, and it works because
That was great.
they're acting crazy.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go too far off track, but like to his credit, the guy who played Jet, he did a pretty good job. It's just the material just wasn't there. That's my only comment on the. I didn't have trust in it to begin with, but the guy who played Jet,
I thought the guy who played Jet was really good. Yeah, I thought he was cool. I don't know why they picked
he was the polar
the guy
opposite
who
of the chick who played Faye, who just spent most of the pre-release time shitting on old fans of Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah.
And
I don't even
shit
think
like
I
that.
got that far into watching the show to fucking see Faye. I can't even remember.
Yeah.
One of my
I think
favorite woke
I
moments
watched-
from current pop culture is when they were doing a Star Wars panel, and Kathleen Kennedy was there, and the actors from, I think The Acolyte I think it was The Acolyte were there, and like they were saying how there's no female representation in Star Wars, and I'm just, are you fucking crazy? Are you blind?
That's funny.
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
And that reminds me
Oh
of
my
God.
that reminds me of a panel at some anime expo where like translators were being interviewed, and they were asking about like, hey, why did you add these lines that weren't in the original? Why do you do this? And like the translator just flat out said to him, I have a vagina, you can't criticize me.
Oh my God.
These people,
I just don't understand
subtitled.
why like when given like a situation where you have like beloved actors and shit, right? Like, and this goes really fucking hard and specific for fucking like for Halo, and this is what I'd been saying this for like a while, like after Cowboy Bebop came out, like why didn't they just make the original like VAs just have like a cameo or something and make their own story, which is precisely probably why I think Fallout is okay, because it's its own story.
But here's
And,
the
like,
thing.
Here's the thing, and
go ahead.
in the context of Halo, like you have this guy who has been voicing the Master Chief for like however fucking long. He basically has like a notorious voice.
Steve Downs.
Yeah, Steve Downs. Why? And you have this character who never takes his fucking helmet off. Why didn't you just have him VA? Like just
because we needed
like
to
voice
take the
over.
helmet off for the sex scene, Joe.
And then Pablo Schreiber was like, I don't think you can convey the same level of emotion with a helmet on as opposed to a helmet off. And
yeah, they did it in Halo
everybody
3.
was like, have you seen Mandalorian? Like
have you
There's
played
also
a
this
game
fucking Halo
called
4.
Halo?
Yeah, it was literally in Halo 4. The
No, I'm
fucking,
talking like in the context of like a live action.
Yeah, and I'm talking in the
series.
context of fucking Halo. The games the show is based on, with his 1 to 3, and whatever.
He didn't even play it. He didn't even play it, and it was
because he doesn't give a fuck.
It was literally like Halo 4. There's that one fucking scene at the end with Cortana and Chief, like just before she like goes crashing down into whatever the fuck. But it was like, you mean no emotion with the helmet? It like, are you just a face? What are you, a fucking head in a bottle? Use the rest of your body. What's the matter with you? It was a stupid point, and it was a stupid show, and the actors just they really did fuck it up so bad.
Yeah.
And it feels like they just don't have imagination, which is ironic because they're supposed to be creatives. I just don't understand why they didn't even consider Steve Downs for that particular type of role. It just feels obvious to me. And that's what I was saying about Cowboy Bebop too. I was just like, why don't you just have your own original Cowboy Bebop like in-universe characters and just have like the original, VAs like for Spike or whoever just kind of come in and do some kind of cameo or something. Like Spike flies a plane, you could just hear Steve Bloom over the fucking radio or something. You could have your own characters and write whatever you want. And anyway, but like I said, they think that the original stories suck and they have to make it better because they're the only people who can, which is stupid and conceited and like, or but that's the way they think. If it's not the fact that they think it's like it's some kind of like checkbook that needs to be balanced, for inclusivity or
Well,
whatever the
that's
fuck.
exactly what it is.
Right.
That's
If they don't
exactly
think
how I
it,
think.
if they don't think it's that, then it's the other thing, and that's that they think they're just better, and that anybody who likes the original thing is stupid, and the consistency doesn't matter because it's not real. Which is a really shitty way to look at anything, because it's just like it's just dismissive
Yeah.
of the the thing that is art, like that we consider art. It is stupid.
So anyway, anyone have any other news topics to discuss?
Well, now that we've had the discussion that Joe wanted to have, that kind of spun off from our talks about localization and Warhammer and stuff like that, and kind of tied that all together, I want to go back to the fucking Fallout show, because listen, if you like it, I'm not going to hate you. However,
I like the first episode. It's coming from a non-fan of the game, which I think is its own thing.
So my experience with Fallout is I liked 1. I think it's a very good game that deserves its reputation. I did not like 2. I think 2 is a little overrated. It's not really that great, but it's playable and enjoyable to a certain extent. I loved 3 when it came out, because I was just like, at that point I was all hopped up on Oblivion. I'm like, Oblivion with guns, this could be cool. I don't like it nearly as much as Oblivion, but I enjoyed it. I couldn't get through 4. My experience with New Vegas is actually fairly limited, even though I know a lot about it. I don't think it's one of those situations where I did a lot of the quests, or most of the quests, but I never finished the game proper. Maybe I'll go back and play it now with all this stuff. And did I already say that I fell asleep playing 4 and I stopped playing 4? I didn't beat it.
I don't think you said that you fell asleep. I just think you just said that
4 is boring and I didn't like it. And then 76 I don't even want to touch. It's not my kind of game.
I think Fallout 4 was the first Fallout game that I've ever tried. Okay. And I got like maybe a couple hours in. I'm like, this isn't really for me.
It's weird. It's most of the Fallout games are either not as good as people say they are, or are like the old school RPGs that people struggle to try. So my opinion on it is this. I'm not like, we talked about this where like there's certain games where I'm like locked in, I know the lore, I could tell you everything about it, and there's certain games where I've played it, I understand it, but I'm not like a lore buff. Fallout is one of those games. However, through different games, and especially from the transition from Interplay to Bethesda, and now with the show, I have noticed some inconsistencies. Now, when Fallout got brought up, like the last 10 minutes when you guys were talking about it, and you guys were making comparisons, Joe, you said Fallout is going off and doing its own thing, and it's okay. That's what you said, right?
Did I say that?
You said something. You basically said
it was a cast of original characters that exist in the Fallout world, and because of that, it's okay, or not okay. Like you're enjoying what they're doing.
Yes. And so,
I suppose I find it more acceptable than rewriting existing established characters.
Here's why I don't find it acceptable, because normally that would be the case. You did your own spin on the story, but it's not connected. It is canon. It directly contradicts multiple things that have happened across the Fallout timeline, and renders one of the games basically like null and void because of some of the actions that take place in the show. That's why I'm, aside from the fact that I think it's a little too hokey for me. It's not that Fallout's like a super serious, like Warhammer kind of game.
For anybody that is listening, like, Anthony is such a fucking hard critic of everything he consumes. Well, it's not like there are positive aspects to this, sure, but it's also something that you come with the fucking hammer at everything.
Listen, I understand that I can be difficult about these kind of things, and I'm not even saying like it's weird, because there's a certain, like, you should be allowed to screw up and understand and make mistakes with your lore, and like it all weaves together into this lovely tapestry of creation that you make. But it's just when other people, like, it's crazy to me, they handed the show off to these people that say like, oh, we're not even going to try to please the fans. It's like, okay, but if you're doing your own thing, that's fine. But then like they come out and say the show is canon to the games, and Fallout as a series, like from 1 all the way up to 4 and whatever's beyond, has taken a shellacking. Like, there's so many different little stories and tidbits you can find where like the writers get into arguments with people on Twitter and social media and basically say like there's this one famous story. where they talk about like one of the drugs in the game, and whether or not it was from before the war or from after the war, and I forget which is which, but it basically shifted. Like it was just retconned at one point randomly, and one of the writers from the Bethesda side got in an argument with this guy on Twitter about it, and then the guy goes like, "Oh well, I have you here. What do you think about like the this one kid that survived in a fridge for 200 years? How do you explain that?" Or like, the drug I just mentioned, what do you say about that? Or like, oh, do ghouls need to eat or whatever? And he said something like, I'm not going to get into an argument about believability in the post-apocalyptic, setting and shit like that. So it's like, why would you want to consume any media from a guy who does not care, who's currently the steward of this series, And that's something that we talk about all the time. But what I'm getting at with the Fallout show is, aside from the fact that I don't think it's necessarily the best show. It had a lot of moments
I'm not
that
saying it's the best show.
No. I'm saying like every now and again a video game adaptation comes out, and people say like, "Oh, the curse is broken." Well, first of all, there have been a handful of good adaptations in existence. I just think that between the fact that games have been striving for mass appeal for quite some time now, and the fact that more often than not video game adaptations do suck, I just think that disrespectful 6 to 7 out of 10s are like being heralded as these amazing passable experiences when they really aren't. And I think the problem with looking at that and saying like, oh, it's okay to like this product that doesn't respect the tone or the lore is okay, leads to just like the IP just going through the mud, and eventually people stop caring and you kill it off, and that doesn't make sense to me. So when it comes to the Fallout show, there's a ton of small inconsistencies, be it with how certain drugs are handled, how certain characters that are in multiple games, or I'm sorry, in the game and the show, even if it's just like a side thing, how they act, how certain events. There's a massive retcon in there that most people are talking. I'm not going to spoil it for Dan, for obvious reasons, but there is a massive retcon in there that basically changes why the entire series happened. It's just that. So it's
actually, I do have a question. You guys are talking about some drug that exists in the Fallout universe, and I guess for whoever is listening for episode 1 of Fallout, potential spoilers here. So you have been warned for episode 1 of Fallout. When they are digging up the ghoul in the first episode, right? It was pretty much like the ending scene of the episode. The 3 guys who went to the grave to get him up, like they were talking about something that was able to keep him, I guess, in a suspended state of animation for 200 or whatever years. Are they going to explain that more later down the line? Because it was like a line or 2 of dialogue, and I had no fucking idea what it was.
See, ghouls in general have a longer lifespan, but it's tough because that's another thing that has been retconned and changed. Like it used to be like ghouls have an extremely extended lifespan, and they don't need to eat or drink, or they needed to eat or drink, and then they made it so they don't need to eat or drink. It's one of those things that's as a result of retcons and them not caring. I cannot give you a straight answer. That's the kind of shit that's a problem. Like it could be one way or the other because they've taken both positions, and it could just be any position now. So I could not tell you the exact reason that he survived so long. And if they explained it better, it might have been one of those things I slept through. It's possible. But in general, becoming a ghoul, regardless of what side of ghouls live very long they are on, you do live longer as a ghoul, despite the horrible shit you go through. And the process in which you become a ghoul also changes based on which game and the TV show you were watching. So even if I wanted to,
I vaguely remember in 3 that like there's Nuketown or something, and then like I think I just at the beginning of the game I just fucking set the bomb off, and then I went over there and like most of the people, if not all of them, were basically dead, and one person who I recognized as like a normal person with a normal human face and hair and everything, like just kind of walked out of the crater, and it was just like, hey, Like, and it
Yeah.
was just a ghoul, and it
That was a clever
like
way they got around keeping around an essential NPC. Is they made her walk from the blast radius as a ghoul.
Jesus.
High radiation is generally the through line, regardless of which pieces of canon they choose to follow. It has to do with radiation, high amounts of radiation. Basically, all I wanted to say, just because we were talking about it, is like I take issue with the Fallout show. It's not because I'm like I have a stick up my ass about the lore, because I'm not a huge Fallout lore guy. I know enough about it to know that there are issues, and I've read up on more things, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that from the games, and then you realize it's being contradicted, and there are a lot of pretty big issues with the Fallout show. But my biggest thing is I just didn't think it was that good. A lot of the small things that I enjoyed about it were just that, small things. I thought the action was kind of crappy. I do think there were more than a few parts where they kind of stumbled into being like the games, even though they said they didn't really want to do that. Like, a lot of the really cheesy action shots where like people are just getting shot or blown away kind of reminded me of the VATS system from 3 New Vegas and 4, where things are in slow-mo. And some of the more ridiculous, like
up in the first episode.
Yeah, and when people just kind of like explode into different pieces and exaggerate, I'm like, oh, it's kind of like the bloody mess perk. But I know they weren't going for that. It's just incidental. Like, the production quality led to them accidentally being kind of like the games in some regards.
I will say, like, when they introduced the Brotherhood of Steel in the first episode,
that's another thing.
I think that the power armor for the Brotherhood is definitely cool, but it does kind of look like a Halloween costume.
Well,
like,
for
you know,
a couple
from like
things.
a prop perspective.
1, it's cheaply made. 2, the way it functions in the show is the spread of things it can do is very different to what it's established to be able to do. Like, basically, if there was ever a part when you're watching the show and you say like, hey, that kind of looks like Iron Man, it's not a Fallout thing. It's them wanting to be more like Iron Man. Like,
which I would understand, considering, like, from a show perspective, how can we make this thing look more relatable to other pop culture things out there, which, I mean, whatever. I'm just saying, from that perspective.
I will say that, like, my opinion on that is completely, because, like, if you take that stance where you go like,
I'm just saying, I'm just putting myself in the shoes of the people who made the show. I'm not saying that I agree with that.
No,
but, like,
I
from
get
a
that, but
television perspective,
yeah, no, I get that, but that's part of where my frustration comes in. Is like, there's no justifiable.
Right. Well, if I was a fan of the
for
game, and if they went out of the way to make, like, a Mass Effect show, but Commander Shepard's armor looked like Iron Man's, I'd be like, fuck you. I get it.
Here's the best way I can put it. There are people who like the Halo TV show and think it's a great sci-fi experience. There are people who saw the flood and got very excited for it, despite the fact that it's no longer a huge, unrelenting cosmic horror. It's just a zombie virus that could potentially be cured now.
Yay. I didn't even know that about the show.
Dan, that's just how they.
I saw the clip. But here's
the thing. But here's the thing, guys. It's fine, because as the producer, it's just something that's more palatable for a wider audience. So I don't know why you guys are complaining so much. It's perfectly fine that it's completely different, because we've got to get other people to watch it. See what I'm saying? Like, that's the kind of stuff that frustrates me. Like, I get it. Like, I hate being in the position where somebody can say like, oh, this was okay, or this was not bad, and me having to come in and just shit on people relentlessly. But it's a standards thing. That's just where my head's at. It's like, and once again, one of the biggest issues with the Fallout thing is it's a culmination of all these things, because it's an iffy adaptation, but it's okay in its results, so you have people flocking to it. But the biggest issue is that it's canon, so all of the missteps are canon to the game. And it's to the point where, like, people are freaking out, to the point where you have Todd Howard come out and he's like, oh yeah, it's canon, it just works. Literally, it just works, even though it does not work. Like, so the meme,
Todd Howard is
but here's the thing, the meme of him saying it just works for the games is what he applied as the fix to the TV show. It just works.
Oh, yikes. Oh no.
So even though like
God.
the show blatantly contradicts a few things, it's canon, so it's okay.
Todd said so.
Todd said so. They even dug out one of the apparently one of the original creators of Fallout said, "Oh, I saw the TV show. I thought it was okay." And everybody's taking that as like, "Oh, see, it has the blessing of the original creator, and that's why it's good now." So it's whatever. Basically I guess what I'm trying to say is I enjoyed some of the Fallout games. I'm glad I don't love the series, otherwise I'd be much more irate. Because I can only juggle so many series getting
Just
raped
wait until they make a Mass Effect show. Just wait.
At least
Haven't they been trying to get it made for years?
Yeah, they have been. Not looking forward to that.
I don't even want to think about that.
You'd think I'd have thicker skin being a Resident Evil fan, given just the absolute shellacking that series takes. But I guess the saving grace is none of the live action shit is canon. They're just really shitty adaptations.
I liked. I thought, what the fuck was it? Resident Evil 2, the movie, 2 or 3. We watched it a lot together. I remember just having fun with it. With Nemesis. Which one was that?
That was 2, I think.
That was 2? Okay. Should watch that.
If you had me watch a Resident Evil movie and then like play a Resident Evil game, I would just be like, these are supposed to be the same thing. Like, what the fuck is it?
So it's actually funny because one of the Resident Evil films, it was when 5 was new. So they basically watched scenes from 5 and made these really shitty low budget versions of it for the movie. Like some of the shit Wesker's doing, and it's like there's a scene in the movie where it's literally a scene from the game where it's Chris and Sheva are attacking Wesker, and they're just getting their asses kicked because he's like a superhuman that can semi-teleport. And they took that scene and recreated it in the film with Chris and Claire, and it's just the most ridiculous low-budget thing. It's faithful in a way where it's like it's tongue-in-cheek, and I would get a kick out of it if it wasn't like the 5th or 4th movie in a long-running series that just disrespects the series that I love. But you know, I don't know. I just video game adaptation. There's, you know, we talk so much about all the ways that games and IPs just get raped. The bad TV or movie adaptation is just a tale as old as time. You know.
Oh man, I hope the Warhammer series is going to be good.
Well, the one with Henry Cavill.
Yeah.
You know, it's actually funny. There's rumors going around that the changes that we talked about earlier were strictly to make something they want to put in the show make sense. And there's also
that would
rumors,
be shitty, honestly.
There's rumors that Henry Cavill is like angry about some of the things happening in the show. And there's a slim chance he may walk. But we'll see what happens.
It's his favorite faction, the one in question.
Oh yeah, because I remember that interview. Yeah. That interview where they're talking about it, and like you have this gaggle of women like laughing as he gets nerdy about 4K, and then the guy on the opposite end of the panel is talking about 4K, and like their eyes light up when they both realize they're interested in it, and they're just like, "Oh, what are you running right now?" And he's like pointing, he's pointing over these women who are laughing about his interest to like talk to this guy on the other side of the stage, saying like, "Oh, you want to talk more about this?" You know, it's funny, but yeah.
Well, you guys want to cover anything else? We're an hour and 30 in, or you want to wrap it up?
Joe, did you have anything you wanted to bring up?
No, I thought you had like the modding, something about modding.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a small thing that I didn't get to cover the last time we talked, where it's because and I wanted to talk to Joe about it to a certain extent because me and him, video game modding. Dan, I don't think you dabble in it at all, right?
I don't do modding whatsoever. I mean, like, I apply mods to my games, sure, but I don't create them.
No, but what I mean is, like, how often do you apply mods to your games at all?
I kind of look through the Nexus mods library for Darktide, like, semi-often, and put them in.
I didn't even know there was a Nexus for Darktide.
Yeah, there's a bunch of really, really, really helpful mods for Darktide that I use that I have to reapply every time the game gets updated.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a lot of unofficial patches. That's one aspect of modding. But then there's I don't know. I thought you had like a very specific.
It's just that like mods. I think mods are coming. We're getting to a point where there's like another wave of scrutinizing mods. There's a few reasons for it. some of it has to do with the fact that there's monetary value in it. Like if somebody can just mod in something that you would normally be able to sell, you know, the companies aren't going to be about that. I've noticed though, in particular, fighting game companies have been getting pretty aggressive with mods lately. Capcom even there was this internal, or not even internal, because I think they ended up putting it on like a website, or they put it up on YouTube, and I think you can watch it, where they have this really old school businessman mentality about it, where they view mods as cheat devices and cheat applications. Yeah, they conflate.
It can give them agency to do so much shit.
Yeah, and the whole thing is like they cite all this crappy things like, oh, you know, if somebody calls customer support and they're using cheats, we won't be able to help them. I'm like, who the hell is calling customer support? Like even like the help me pages online, like is that something that's like active? Anyway, so very recently, like, so Capcom's had that kind of stance, but they haven't really made too many moves. They just kind of like there's just a bunch of hot air about it, right? Namco with Tekken has been very aggressive lately. Like they've been taking down videos from modders that advertise mods. They've been taking down videos on Twitter that advertise mods, and they've been directly complaining to the main Tekken site called Tekken Mods, I think it's called. And this kicked off when they showed their monetization, which is they're doing a battle pass now. They're adding legacy costumes, which a lot of people have pointed out are kind of ported and upscaled from Tekken 7. And people have said like, oh, you know, it's because, you know, they're doing this stuff because Namco and the industry are doing bad, so they have to lead with the stuff they poured over. And it's like, that's besides the point, that they're attacking mods and people who do the modding, and it's more aggressive than ever. Like every week I hear about like a guy who's been with the scene for as long as they've been doing PC releases, and it's just like, oh, they took down my videos, they struck my channel, I don't have a channel anymore, they're directly cease and desist. And I'm sitting there going, well, that's pretty shitty. And then you have Koei Tecmo with the Dead or Alive series. There was just like there was a mod that makes the game launch better and has minor balance patches that got struck out of nowhere. And I think it's something that we're going to see more of, just as a mixture of companies trying to get more money out of, you know, it's like, okay, the prices of costumes are going up and the effort going into them is going down, so people are just going to turn to modding, which even then I don't even think has like a big market for it. But you should be... I've had this conversation with Joe where he's talking like, oh, I'd probably just mod this in, and I call him gay because like he's like modding in like things into his single player game that just makes the shit easier, and I think that's retarded. But like cosmetics and things like that, it's just like, you know, I think you should be able to do what you want, and you should be able to download mods that add additional features if that's something that you want to do too.
Are you referencing our discussion of Dragon's Dogma 2?
Yes.
Is that what?
Yes, I'm referencing
hilarious.
that because that no,
So
don't go no. This is stupid.
Capcom
It's like here's the thing.
Microtransactions.
No, shut up. No. See, because now, listen, you're taking the stance that all the morons online take. You're taking that stupid stance that is just like, oh, you know, you can like all the shit you can buy. It's you said to me just like, oh, there's no fast travel, so I'm just gonna mod in the port crystals or whatever, despite the fact that you can get the port crystals in game. And you're talking like the microtransaction shit. The microtransactions are shit. I don't care. Like it almost falls into that category of I don't care if people who pick up the game once and just buy all the shit and never play it again and never speak about it again, but they put money into it, and that theoretically should make the games better or help them recoup on whatever, you know, the development costs were. I don't like the mods that you're talking about are separate from the
ones I was referencing are the ones that allow you to change your character's appearance, and fairy stones and or camp kits you may, I think, get from purchasing like the deluxe version of the game or some shit like that.
Okay, so
I was just like,
listen, I get that, but there's like the thing that allows you to change your appearance. You basically trip over them. Like you can find ways to buy them. I think that if they it would make sense for that option to be just in the game, right, and be there. But I don't see the decision to lock it behind an item a monetary thing. I don't, because the original Dragon's Dogma had similar restrictions on that. As far as the fairy stones, that was always a consumable thing that you can get more of in the game. And as far as the
Dark
campsite,
Arisen, you got the eternal fairy stone though.
Yes,
they just gave it to everyone.
Yes, but in vanilla, the original Dragon's Dogma, which is a more apt comparison, it didn't have that. And as far as the campsites go, they've already changed it where like one campsite, it's a patch that they put out where it's like campsites. Even though I'll be honest, I was never hurting for campsites. You just kind of find them. I thought it was more cumbersome for a weight perspective, but now it's, you have one, you never need to buy it again because it's one works constantly forever now. But it's, my main thing with you is, my issue with you, which is separate from the monetization, is you were talking about like port crystals. Port crystals, you can't buy the port crystals, you just earn them in game, and that is like your main means of fast traveling. But this is all besides the point. That all I'm getting at is that I think the modding conversation is stupid, because you have, on the one hand, you have the companies that overreach and see them as cheats and see them as manipulating the system when they're not. They're just let people do what they want with their game as long as they're not hurting anybody else. And on the other hand, we have people like Joe who defend them with bad arguments, like, oh, they charge like $1 for a port crystal, so I should just be able to go in there and just cheat if I want to and make the game super easy. So that it's just, I hope you two tear each other apart, I guess. I had a much more...
Was it ever actually... Here's the thing. Was it ever actually hard? That was the question, I guess.
I don't know. You're acting like it's hard because you need to mod it in.
No, it was... I would mod it in because people who don't have time can just buy it, and I don't want to pay for it. Given that,
well, you don't have
given
to pay
that,
for
it's,
it, but
listen,
what I'm getting at is the game is the game is balanced around you not having them.
No, it isn't, because
yes,
if it was balanced around it, then they wouldn't offer it as a microtransaction.
No, I get that. See, that's the thing, is you haven't, like, I get that, and this is this goes all the
important to them. If it was so important to them to put, if it was so important to them that their vision of you traversing the landscape was so intrinsic to their vision that you had to do it and there was no way to get around it, they would not have sold it on the cash shop. That's the point I'm making.
Yeah, but like,
so I would mod it in,
but
if I wanted to.
But here's the thing, is this is where it gets a little tricky, and this is something we've talked about at some point, is it really depends on the game experience itself, and you don't really know unless you trust them a certain way or until you play the game, is whether or not the game is balanced around it basically, what it is if you play the game, are you able to tell, like, oh, they took something out to sell it to you, or is it like, oh, it is literally you'd be paying for like something that breaks the game? Like a good example, and it's a little bit clearer, is in the Persona games, Persona 3 Reload and Persona 5. There has been day one DLC where basically what it is it takes personas from previous games, which are the things you summon, which determine your overall strength and what skills you can cast. They take them from previous games, and they basically give you, if you buy them, you basically have level 60 to 99 personas that just break the entire fucking game. Now, when I look at the Persona games, I don't say like, oh, they're selling this, so the game is balanced. The game is balanced around me having them. They just took it out, and so that's not the case. In the case of Dragon's Dogma, those consumable things, it's not something that is just like the developers made the game and put 5 of them in your inventory, and then Capcom took the 5 out and sold them to you. It's previous Capcom games, the Resident Evil games, they sell items that you can unlock as like post-game unlockables, or if you just want to like get weapon upgrades without earning the money for them in-game or using the gun to a certain point where you can upgrade. Those have existed, and I'm not saying I'm for or against them. I thought they were inevitable, given that back when Dragon's Dogma 1 was new, there were already articles about people saying, I work a 9 to 5 and I have 800 kids, so I don't have the time to play video games. Could you just give me all the shit for free? Or could you give me the option to pay for them? Because we had people that, just as a result of having all these people come in that don't actually care about the experience, the wider audience, you had people saying, could I just pay to play? So what I'm getting at is, and where we differ here is, like, you're looking at it, like, when I say the game is not balanced around you having them, it's because it's not. It's like the original Dragon's Dogma, the vanilla one, before they in Dark Arisen, where they basically made it so that you could teleport and fast travel everywhere, and it kind of broke the game, because you could just go wherever the fuck you wanted. It really isn't designed around that, and even if it was, it's the fairy stones, not the port crystals, which means you can only teleport back to the main camp, or
That's
I'm
what I
sorry,
was
the
more or
main
less
city
referring
anyway.
to. When we were talking about it, I was saying the fairy stone, like, one, again, so in Dark Arisen, and this is the thing that happened, when they released the original Dragon's Dogma, people were complaining about how empty the world felt. They were complaining about how empty, or, like, I guess kind of, what's the word, inconsequential everything in the world felt. Like, you could just traverse the terrain and you could either not run into anything or just run into mobs constantly, and you would just kind of be mobbed down by fighting. And it's not even, like I said, in regards to the difficulty, it's not even just the fact that, like, it's hard. It's a matter of it being time consuming and for some people just kind of not fun, which is where modding comes into play. And the thing that ended up happening in Dark Arisen when they released it was they gave players the Eternal Fairy Stone basically for free. And if I remember correctly, they also put more port crystals in the game in general.
Yeah,
which people, what?
They did.
They added more port crystals. So that kind of alleviated the feedback that people didn't like this aspect of the game, and I thought that was fine. So if they put, like, a sufficient number of port crystals into Dragon's Dogma, then that's what I would be like, okay, whatever. I wouldn't know that because I didn't play, but I knew that fairy stones in the first game were a fucking pain in the ass, and they were annoying, and they kind of just saved me time when I did have them, and I was fine when they added the Eternal Fairy Stone because it just saved me time to go back to, like, Grand Soren or whatever the main city was. So I thought it was fine. So when I saw them putting it on the cash shop, I was like, wow, why would they put it on the cash shop unless they would design the game around me needing it, which is, if they put it in the cash shop in the first game before Dark Arisen, that kind of feels like that's what they would have done. So, I mean, but that's what a lot of gaming companies do, is they create a problem and then sell you the solution, which is, that's a shitty way to handle microtransactions.
No, I get what you're saying, but and it's going to come down to individual cases, and it's also going to come down to, like, what you actually feel when you experience the games is it's not it's not like a manufactured problem. It's, if you see it as a problem, that's one thing. Those are there really just to milk money out of casual fans and people who aren't going to touch the game all that often. The game, when you play Dragon's Dogma 2, the game is designed in a very particular, like, it doesn't strike me as somebody who's put plenty of hours into it. It does not strike me as the case where they said, like, okay, well, we have this game here, but let's make the traversal a little bit more difficult, or let's make this a little bit more tedious so that we can sell these stuff. It has the same design philosophy as the first Dragon's Dogma, but with a fleshed out world and more ways to get around. Like, for example, you talked about, like, oh, it's an empty open world and the traversal kind of sucks. In Dragon's Dogma 2, aside from having, port crystals in major cities, and you can get a port crystal, I think I found 2 so far, and the fairy stones, which you use kind of sparingly when you're really far out and just need to get back, is major cities and a few towns have carts where you can go up. If it's not there waiting for you, you ring the bell and your guy waits there until there's a cart, and it alleviates that. Like, getting around in Dragon's Dogma 2 still has that aspect of, when you're going somewhere for the first time, or if you're you're running to somewhere off the beaten path, you are going to be walking and running for a while. However, return trips and going to different major hubs is like, it's in such a way where it's not like Dragon's Dogma 1, where it's like if you wanted to go from the starting zone to Grand Soren, it's a trek and a half because there's no way to expedite that outside of Port. There would be, if it was like a Dragon's Dogma 2 version, there would be a cart that runs between the two that you can freely just go and wait for. So it's like that's what I'm saying. It's like where we kind of differ in this opinion is the aspect of monetization in that way it doesn't strike me as an artificial problem. It's like, oh, Dragon's Dogma 1 was built a certain way. Dragon's Dogma 2 is a sequel that has a lot of changes to incorporate that, but they also have the original means of travel. And they sell it because people buy it and because casual consumers basically begged for these options for 10, 15 years. It's one thing with all the things we talk about, like people shouldn't change the core experience to satisfy these people, but if they want to pay like an extra $10 for something that you could just get in the game because they're lazy or they don't have the time, as long as the core experience isn't changed, I'm fine with that. And in this case, the core experience wasn't changed. So that's my only take on it. And basically, I guess what I'm getting at this, because I wanted to talk about mods, is there was like day one, there was a trainer up for Dragon's Dogma 2, and it's fine if people want to use that, but to say, like, to kind of justify it in the light where it's just like, oh, well, they're selling it, so I can just take, it's like, that's fine, I get that, you can mod whatever you want to your own game, but I don't like it when people pretend like it's a necessity because, like, I like the aspect that your hand was forced to mod a game because of something the company did, even though the experience, like the core experience, doesn't reflect that at all. Just, it seems silly to me. It's like the same people who say like, oh, I pirate because they don't make demos anymore, you know? That just seems a little silly to me.
I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
Mods, Daniel. You know, it's the same thing. Like, emulation is one blind spot. Mods is another for you. But basically, they're getting more strict with mods. It's just going to be an uphill battle. Personally, I'm actually happy that they're getting more strict with mods because places like Nexus Mods and Game Banana have gotten way, way too comfortable with their power. I don't know if you guys... this isn't going to go on much longer.
I'm familiar.
So like basically it's just like if they're not progressive mods or if they're anti-progressive mods, they get removed. If it's... I've seen fan patches...
problematic mods, anything that
like,
kind of...
Here's a few off the top of my head. There was people didn't like pride flags in Spider-Man, so there was a mod to remove all the pride flags. Got taken down on all the major sites. Took it down. I'm just like, all right, well, that's strange.
That makes me laugh.
There was a retranslation of one of the Fire Emblem games that was made to be more accurate because there was a lot of you know, fan servicey stuff and gender stuff in there that wasn't it, that was kind of added in the American version, and somebody's like, oh, here's a more accurate translation, and bizarrely enough, like all these mod sites took it down. Very strange. So these sites are getting way too comfortable with how much power they have, and I think if these companies crack down harder on these modders, you know, some of them obviously aren't going to bounce back, but I think some of them will turn to alternatives that aren't like consolidated, and I think that's better in the long run for mods if it's not consolidated in a few places that have a very particular lean.
All right,
yeah.
Cool.
That's fair.
And I think, and it's actually funny, one of the earliest things that kind of kicked off all this thing is there were Street Fighter mods since 5. A lot of them are very, very, very lewd and horny. And at a tournament for Street Fighter 6, somebody left a nude mod on. And and this was like a Capcom Pro Tour tournament that was on somebody's setup. And
Nice. Funny.
And it's funny, like, I don't think it was strictly because of that. I think it's honestly the older CEO crusty mindset of like, these are cheat devices and they're bad. But I do think it's funny that this nude mod being shown like on main stage at a tournament kind of coincided with their shift in opinion on mods, even if that's not exactly what happened. So That's about all I have to say on mods. I kind of went off the track of what I wanted to say because I get heated at Joe and his modding opinions.
You think?
But that's really it.
No, I think he's just mad because I was complaining about Dragon's Dogma 2 when it
No,
was
I
just
Yeah,
don't.
about
that
to come
definitely
out
has something to do with it
listen,
too.
because
No,
of
no,
the
no.
microtransactions.
No,
But
my whole thing, it's linked because, like I said, my like,
we've had discussions about this before
yeah,
because we in regards to games like Sekiro or whatever, and there was a discussion about adding an easy mode to something like Sekiro or
yeah.
Neo or some Dark Souls game, and I was basically just like, if I just basically said I don't really care because I can beat these games just fine on my own,
Mhm.
but like I guess I didn't really give a shit if like somebody
Somebody
who
modded it
like
in.
sucks at video modded it if someone who sucks at video games or couldn't beat it on their own modded it in. It's just like I don't give a shit. Like it's whatever. It's just that's if it's a single player game and they're playing it however the fuck they want, then I don't give a shit. They especially if they modded it in because in that
Mhm.
case they didn't alter the original product
Yeah,
at all,
I just
and they didn't you like kind of use any influence to like alter the original, so to speak.
yeah. I guess my stance on modding as a whole in that particular way where it kind of changes the experiences. I don't care if people do it. There are some games that I've modded to kind of expand. Bethesda games are notorious for being very mod heavy. But basically, my thing is like, I take issue when people make excuses for modding as if they're guilty about it, or if people like mod their experience and then start writing articles about why the game should reflect their mods. So that I guess that's my take on it. I'm not a huge mod guy, honestly. I think the guy who's most into it is that I know is probably you, Joe, and that's like a whole realm. I'm not particularly. That's not important to me, even though like, I'm not
So
like, you know.
I don't know if you wanted to if you were trying to wrap it up here,
No. What were we gonna say?
but basically I'm kind of I'm not acutely aware because obviously because I don't speak Japanese myself, but
Mhm.
I know that in the realm of at least Final Fantasy 14 and shit like that,
Mhm.
one of the things you'll find on websites, I believe like Skeb, is that a lot of Japanese artists will refuse to draw your character if you have a modded character and things
Really?
like that. So it may actually be a cultural thing.
Oh yeah, there's an
In
aspect of
regards to
culture there.
right like the kind of like what's the word the how kind of Nintendo can be a little bit draconian about mods and shit. Like I mean, realistically, and I feel like this is at least a little bit worth mentioning. Like you like co-op games, right, Anthony?
Oh,
Like
of course.
you would admit that you like co-op games, right? So
Admit
if
it like it's a
someone
crime.
yes, no, it's not a crime. I'm just saying. Well, obviously, I don't think it's a crime. That's the way I feel personally.
Yeah.
But like,
Yet.
for example, someone allegedly had modded in co-op mods for like Breath of the Wild, which obviously that's not even supposed to be on the fucking computer in the first place. But that's kind of besides the point. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like someone modded it in and Nintendo fucking went after them like really hard, and it was
Yeah.
just like, why? You know what I mean? Like, but if, for example, me and you both wanted co-op in Dragon's Dogma for like
Yes.
forever, if someone modded that into the game somehow, like I can't imagine that you would be opposed to something like that,
Yeah.
right?
My whole thing about mods is like the more distant you get from the original experience without changing it, like it's almost like an add-on where you can experience it from a different angle, or if it's, using the existing stuff to create something different. And the further from having like the older the game is when you mod it, like I'm more amenable to it. Like when a game's fresh and new, I don't like to go in with mods, but if 3 years from now somebody came, oh, Dragon's Dogma 2 co-op mod, I'd probably be like, oh yeah, let's give that a shot.
Right. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's like kind of a matter of like perspective and what you consider like too much or like that people say like this game or that game shouldn't be like this way or whatever. And like for in regards to like Dan could probably relate to this, or I feel like I may have mentioned this in the last one, the last episode. I complain about the fucking heavy machine gun in Helldivers 2 constantly. And I'm kind of at odds with the community because the community doesn't like they don't they it's really weird because they'll like say like, oh, the railgun was too strong and it got nerfed and now it's dog shit, and then like
I don't
they
think it's
kind of
dog
can't,
shit.
they can't really agree on like what the fuck like
Of course
weapons
not,
are too
because the gamers
strong.
never know what they want ever.
Right, right. And this is the point where I'm like, man, I really wish I could enjoy using the heavy machine gun. And obviously, like the only solution for me to like really do that alongside anybody else would be for me to fucking mod Helldivers too. And it's like you could technically say that I'm like cheating if I did something like that. I don't even know where to begin doing that, especially because it's like an online game and shit. So
I
I
don't
don't
think
I don't even
you could. You couldn't. It's a
well,
live service game.
that's the other thing is that I know people are using like cheats in it to like access not
Right, because
officially
it
released
wouldn't
shit.
be modding. It would be something else entirely. It'd be like an
Right.
exploit.
Right. It's they're using cheats basically to access shit that's not officially released but is in like the game files. And I
Yeah.
like it kind of just got me thinking because especially because and like um I had been I occasionally scroll Facebook whenever I'm like bored at work or something. And like I think like two articles in a row popped up for Helldivers 2. Obviously, the algorithm or whatever knows that I'm interested in this game, so they show me articles, relevant and recent to the game. And I see interviews from like Arrowhead employees, or either that or the Arrowhead CEO or something, and he says something along the lines of like, one, uh, he says we are not adding fucking transmog to the game or something like that, or we're
Yeah.
not we're not we're not.
Yeah,
Yeah, he said we're
I
not
saw
adding
that.
transmog. Then like almost immediately after that, not like immediate, but like same day, just me browsing at a different time, I see, we're not adding transmog, and armor that you see in like leaked screenshots may not actually be released.
Right. Well,
And
like, of course, any
this is
sane person would assume that.
right. So this is the kind of situation where I'm looking at this situation and I'm just like I don't fucking like to an extent I don't fucking care what this guy thinks. And I just want to have fun with the game. I
Right.
don't
Mm.
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't give a fuck about his opinion on what he thinks his game should be at this point because it so harshly like clashes with my own opinion and like you were saying like, oh, this is a problem because like, oh, now I'm exerting control or whatever, and I'm just like, well, like this is the thing, like if I were to forswear playing with other people in this fucking MMO community, which I typically do in the first place because like fucking everybody else, I don't play with any of these fucking guys regardless. I play with like basically my friends exclusively. So like if I wanted to add in the fucking cool Jinro armor because they won't release it, you know what I mean? The Kerberos armor, if you've ever seen it.
Okay.
If they won't release it for whatever reason and I fucking mod it in, it's just like now I'm against him. And what if I modded the heavy machine gun to not be a piece of shit because it's horrible.
Hey. I don't think it's that bad. I think it has a very specific purpose, and most people are not using it for that purpose. Now you have to really lean into it, but I think it's pretty good when you're using it for certain things.
From what I
Um,
hear, it's good for the bots. And that
Not
that can be
even. I've been
true.
using it on bug planets.
Well,
It will delete like bile spewers and brood commanders, and if you catch a charger the right way, you can take those out really quick also. But
you
the
mean like shooting in
the
the ass?
yeah, but the
Because
bile
I've noticed
titans
that,
it's no good for.
right, which is kind of for the most
Because
part
like a lot of
accurate.
times you'll get swarmed by like a bunch of bile spewers or brood command, like all the medium enemies, and your regular primary just isn't gonna cut it. So I've been in on runs on like suicide mission where I've taken out the heavy machine gun and just deleted like 5 or 6 of them that were in front of me, and then switch back to my regular gun and just keep going. I think that's really what it's made for. Now, is that disappointing? Yes, I think that is disappointing. But I think that the heavy machine gun had a really specific purpose. They just didn't. Everyone assumed that it was just going to be like this monster of a weapon, and it wasn't.
Right. Which that again, it is in my opinion is disappointing. And that's you can say what, we can talk about the balancing of it. I personally feel that it's not worth its own stratagem slot, mainly because I use a weapon like the Scorcher, or I've used the Dominator before I had
I've
access to
still
the
yet to
Scorcher.
unlock the Scorcher.
It is a difficult weapon to unlock because it's on the last page of the
Right.
most expensive war bond. So, but if you were to get the Steel Veterans one, that one is basically just as good, and it's like right there on, I think, on the second page, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
But
I've been using the Dominator too.
right,
I've
the
been
thing
getting
is,
a big kick out of the Liberator Penetrator though. I like that one.
right, the thing is, those two guns, they can handle almost all of the enemies that the heavy machine gun says it can handle.
Yeah.
That's in my opinion, that, and I wouldn't even necessarily say that's an issue. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, nerf the Scorcher or whatever. I just think that why the fuck would I call in the heavy machine gun when I can handle all that shit with the Scorcher on its own?
Right. No, I see what you're saying, and I
Yeah,
don't necessarily disagree. I was just saying
right,
when I've played with the heavy machine gun, I really leaned into it hard, and just to see what I could do with it.
right,
And it really seems to be, it's really made for the medium enemies. Like, but anything else, like no one is going to use that thing.
right. And that's why I'm just like, if I could mod this gun in to be more fun or something, then I probably would, even if it makes the game a little bit easier. That's kind of that's kind of where, like, like I said, I'm at this line where, like, if I can't agree with the way like the game is on its own, like in a vanilla state, like after a certain point, like, if you I come to this kind of point where, like, you I have like basically like two options. I could either buy the game and hate it so much that I mod it. I could not buy the game and don't play it because I don't like just the way it is, which is another option. And, like, you, that's the thing. It's like where it almost seems like if you're telling me that, like, I can't mod the game or I shouldn't mod it, it's almost as if you just would prefer, or you're saying that I just shouldn't buy the game at all, which is that's
I think
I
that's
guess
kind of
that's
a
the
loaded statement.
So
think
I mean, I'll answer this kind of thought experiment here, because it's because of my extremists and very critical views. My stance on it is like, is because of how sensitive things have gotten with the creative process and how people feel entitled. And this isn't about you. This is just like a general thing. Is like, if there's a situation where you put a gun to my head and say, like, I don't know, it's tricky, because basically, what you said is where you're just like you're basically saying, like, I shouldn't buy the game if I can't mod it that way. I don't agree that companies should make it impossible for you to mod games outside of, like, obvious situations where it's like multiplayer experiences where you can directly affect another player, which is rare. It doesn't I can't think of many situations where mods like that actually exist and take off. Normally they are flagged as cheats, but at the same time, it's like, it's the experience of somebody who goes into a game needing to mod it or wanting to mod it without experiencing the game proper, like, doesn't matter to me. So if I'm in a situation sitting here on the fence in the middle, in between people who mod games and companies who take extreme positions on them, like, let's say a year from now, just, this isn't going to happen, obviously, a year from now, Dragon's Dogma 3 comes out and has all these fun features, right? And Capcom invents the perfect DRM where it's impossible to mod the game. And, that's ridiculous for many reasons. They shouldn't take that away. And somebody says to me, like, if I can't mod the game, I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to play it. I say like, okay, good riddance. Like that doesn't matter to me. Like what matters is the experience of the game. Sure, the practices of the company at the top are shitty, and they shouldn't restrict your experience by not letting you mod things. But like that kind of like, I'm not going to play the game because I cannot mod it, doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is the game itself. You know, it's like a separate issue. Like, so if there's a game that you just won't play because you can't mod it, that matters less to me than the extreme of stopping companies from preventing mods in the first place, I guess, if that makes sense. So if there's a situation where you say like, well, I can't mod the game, so I'm not going to play it, I think that's asinine, but you're entitled to that opinion, you know? That's my take.
Yeah, I can
on
get behind that one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I understand, and I'm fine with people modding their games for their own experiences. I take issue when it either, you know, affects other people, which is rare, when they're trying to make claims that their modding experience should be the game proper. And this, on a more personal note, I take issue with people playing the game in a way that's modded where it's basically cheating. Not in the same way that these companies talk about like mods or cheats, but in the way where it's like you're basically playing the game with a trainer or a mod that gives you resources and stat values change and stuff like that, and are using that to experience the game proper and shit like that. I don't know. So if you put a gun to my head and say like, oh, you know, if this company removes my ability to mod the games, I won't play it. Like, I'm not gonna, like, if you put that extreme in front of me, I'm not gonna side with the person who's being unreasonable about mods. Like, you can hate a position on companies preventing mods or taking a stance against mods without like the extreme of devaluing whatever the game experience is. Like, there's a shitty process and then there's a quality of the game. I think those two are separate. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. Makes sense, Joe.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If you disagree, that's fine. It's not me saying fuck you, Joe. Never play games that you can't mod. It's just, if when pushed to that extreme, that's the position I take. But it doesn't need to come to that extreme, because like there are other conversations to have around the games when these shitty policies are being enacted. That's all.
Is there anything else anybody wants to say?
Well, I wanted to get into a fierce 4-hour-long political debate. If you have time for that, no, fuck that. I just wanted to get, Joe mentioned it because I mentioned it to him before, but I just wanted to get that mod thing out of the way because I wanted to talk about it 2 weeks ago, but yeah. So.
Well, unless anybody else has any other topic to get to, I think that about does it.
Yeah, I think that's it. Joe, is there anything you wanted to say?
No, that's it.
It was a new record actually for the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
About 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah, it'll probably be a little shorter when we cut out the beginnings and the ends and whatnot. But
yeah. All right. Well, I mean, to all 20 of you listening, thanks for listening. And another 2 weeks, we will have another episode up. Mm-hmm. So, thanks and good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.